Hello ladies and gentlemen, once again this is Infosog J the Great, Jeremy Smith. Today we're going to be taking a closer look at the Nikon 85mm 1.8G. Nikon, they've slowly been updating all of the prime lenses in their lineup. I believe they started with the 105mm macro like back in 2003, 2004, something like that. And over the past few years have given us lots and lots of high-end primes. They've given us a new 85 1.4, a 35 1.4, 24 1.4, lots of really high-end lenses. And all of those, of course, are very, very good, but they're all, above $1,000. Now they're starting to thankfully get to some of the lenses that, more average people are going to be able to afford. And so that brings us to this lens here. The prior version of the 85 1.8, while a very, very good lens, with it not being AFS, it didn't focus on it didn't focus on any of Nikon's recent entry-level bodies, like the D3100 and 3200 and 5100 and all those, just because all those cameras lack a built-in autofocus motor. But with this lens being AFS, that's not something you have to worry about. We are going to take a closer look at some samples, and I'm going to update. I'm going to put the links to all the sample photos in the description down below. And as I shoot with this lens more, I'm going to update it. So far in shooting with this lens, the main difference that I noticed between it and the previous version, which unfortunately I never owned a copy of the previous version, but the main difference after borrowing that lens that I noticed was this one is much, much sharper wide open. I did do some tests comparing it to the I took a few samples comparing it to the 85mm 1.4G, and surprisingly this lens is very, very close. The biggest difference in image quality between these two lenses, between the 85 1.8G and the 85 1.4G, is actually not anything to do with the sharpness. They're both very, very sharp wide open, as you'll see in a moment. The biggest difference, though, was actually in the bokeh, the quality of the out of focus areas behind your subject. So the 85 1.4 was a little bit smoother, but when you think that this lens costs $5.99 and the 1.4G is $16.99, it's awfully hard to say that it's that much different in quality. But we're going to go ahead and take a close up view of the lens here, and then I'll show you guys some samples. Okay, taking a closer look at the lens here, you can see it has its name right on its little nameplate here, like most Nikon lenses. AFS Nikkor 85mm 1.8G. AFS, of course, meaning that it has a focusing motor built into the lens, and G meaning that it doesn't have an aperture ring, which neither of those is going to be a worry with modern day cameras. Okay, we'll take this rear cap off here. Just because it is the step down from the pro level lens doesn't mean that they skimped on build quality, thankfully. So you can notice it's a metal mount lens, and it does have a gasket back there for the weather sealing, which is nice. I've also noticed that on all the recent Nikon lenses and bodies, they've been putting a much, much larger little dot there to help you line up the mounting on the camera. So when you're changing lenses and you're in a really, really low light condition, you don't have to look around and say, okay, where's that spot? The other nice thing is this is actually, not only is it enlarged, but it's actually raised. They actually, glued a little piece of plastic on there, so it's actually raised. You can feel it with your thumb as you run it across there. So if you're foaming around in low light, it's much, much easier to change lenses on all the newer designs now. So that's very nice. From a physical standpoint, I suppose the only thing that I don't like about this lens is the fact that the front filter size is actually 67 millimeters as opposed to 77. 77, of course, being the standard with all pro level lenses, which I guess to be fair, this is not technically a pro level lens. That's what the 85-1.4 is for, so no big deal there. But yeah, if you have a bunch of 77 millimeter filters, unfortunately we're kind of out of luck on that. The other thing is, this lens, the diaphragm in this lens is 7 blades as opposed to 9. Some people swear up and down that having a lens diaphragm with more blades gives you better bokeh. Whether or not that's actually true or not, I have no idea. I will go ahead and tell you though that the bokeh on the 85-1.4G is better than the bokeh on this lens. But as I mentioned earlier, sharpness is practically identical. But anyways, you don't have to take my word for it. We're going to take a look at some of the samples right now. Okay, we're taking a look at some samples here. See guys, I told you I wasn't going to continue to record using a camera filming my screen forever. Thanks for the patience on that. Anyways, we have over here on the left side, we have an image that was shot with the Nikon D7000 and the 85mm 1.8 at 1.8. And on the right side we have an image taken with the Nikon D7000 and the 85mm 1.4 at 1.4. And as I was mentioning earlier, the sharpness between both of these lenses is pretty much the same. If we just zoom in here, actually the 85-1.8 wide open is a little sharper than the 85-1.4 wide open. If you look at the detail in the eyes here, and that's actually very, very typical when it comes to comparing an 85mm, or excuse me, a 1.4 lens compared to like a 1.8 lens. Usually the 1.8 is going to be much sharper when wide open. Oftentimes the best bokeh and sharpness don't go hand in hand, unless you're talking about like Zeiss lenses, which that's a different story altogether. So you can definitely see some difference in sharpness there. However, the greater story is whenever you start to look at the bokeh. In this particular image, I've got several different things behind the subject to kind of get a good idea of how that's going to look as far as bokeh is concerned. So we'll zoom in here. If we look at the bokeh of the 85-1.8 here, you'll notice that around all these areas where there's all these different random objects in the background, you notice how the edges around those objects are more defined. If we compare it to the 1.4, all those edges are much, much smoother. You know, it becomes more like a painting type effect. You can see how everything kind of blends together. And that's something that continues throughout this image. Even if we go over to this side of the image here, you can see the same thing. It is very subtle, but there is definitely a difference. See, once again, you can kind of see how that comes together. Look at all these dark tones here. Compared to over here, it all just kind of blends together a lot more. I have another image here that I thought would be good to show you guys this. If I can get Lightroom to behave. There we go. Okay, so in this picture, I have some more, bright highlights and that sort of thing in the background here. If we look at sharpness, pretty much the same. I tried to keep the composition as close as I possibly could. So sharpness, once again, pretty similar there. But yeah, whenever we start looking at the out of focus areas, like up here in these trees, you can see here on the 1.4, all the detail in those trees just kind of blends together in this nice gradient of green tone. Whereas over on this side, it's a bit more blocky. You know, all the transitions aren't quite as smooth. And so yeah, that continues on throughout the image. Down here we've got a nice highlight off a car here. A little reflection there. So you can see, like this area right here, if you look at it on the 1.4 lens, it does a nice job of blending all that together. However, on the 1.4, even if you do have really bright highlights, it's still going to, you know, they're still going to have fairly defined edges. But all in all, I mean, hands down, you know, there's a reason why the 85 1.4 is called the cream machine, as some people call it. But yeah, I mean, it renders the background very nicely. Yeah. All in all, though, I would say that you can't really go wrong with either one of these lenses. If you just absolutely have to have the best portrait lens, the 85 1.4 is definitely going to be the best of the two. If you don't feel like spending almost 3 times the price, then yeah, the 1.8 it's still very good. Sharpness is not an issue with either of these. But yeah, if you're obsessed like me, you know, with looking at the quality of the bokeh and so forth, then the 1.4 is definitely the lens for you. If you have questions, definitely write me in the comments below, and definitely subscribe. Until next time, this is Photog Jay the Great, Jeremy Smith, signing off.